What is up, NFL fans, and welcome back to another episode of The Way We See It. I'm Jeff Hartman, joined by Wesley Coleman as we give you the latest and greatest in the National Football League. Wesley, what's going on?
Hey man, I'm getting ready, getting closer and closer to the draft. I like seeing these pro days and
Yeah.
seeing what people did differently versus the combine or didn't. And that we got some of these surprise guys that weren't invited to the combine or throwing up some crazy numbers. So it's fun.
Yeah, this week, especially because this is kind of the last week before the draft that we get general NFL news with the league meetings, league owner meetings down in Florida. You've got people that we talked about the proposals last week on the show and what that could mean for the league. We have some of those results, but this is also when the owners, general managers, coaches are sometimes in front of the media, and you get some sound bites and you get some slogans and sayings, which are pretty interesting. And one caught my attention. That was the Cleveland Browns owner, Jimmy Haslam, when he called the trade with the Houston Texans for Deshaun Watson a quote, swing and miss. And so I think that it was worth talking about on this program. First, to start off the show with, how bad is an NFL swing and miss? So let's first label what you would deem a swing and miss. We know Jimmy Haslam's talking about the Deshaun Watson trade and the contract, but Wesley, in your opinion, what would fall under the category of an NFL swing and miss?
Yeah. So I mean, where the Deshaun Watson comes in is because it's the twofold. It's it's one of the worst trades in NFL history, and then immediately the same day as the trade is one of the worst contracts in NFL
Yeah.
history, if not. And it's arguable that you can take them separately and call it the worst trade in NFL history, and you can call it the worst contract. But once you put it together, swing and miss. Now, I think that I think that people have admitted to bad contracts and bad trades before, but never while the player is still on your team for 3 more years. Like this is what was astounding.
The most Browns thing ever, is it not?
I mean, he admitted, like, I get it. Deshaun Watson's probably not going to play this year, and if he does, I mean, I'm sure Cleveland's going to do everything they can to not have him ever throw a pass for him. But you've got a couple $150 million more dollars you're going to pay him, and I think putting this out publicly, like, it's really tough to ask him to go out and throw a pass for your team.
I don't think he's ever going to throw a pass for the team. I think they walk away and just eat the money eventually.
Does he ever throw a pass in the NFL again for any team?
Why would he? I mean, think about that. Why would he? Cooper Rush is a better quarterback right now who got a deal with Baltimore to be a backup. I mean, who would be there's a million different options right now better than Deshaun Watson. He was awful when he had the opportunity.
But there was a time that when the trade, outside of allegations and settlements and everything else, a trade made sense for him because he was on a pretty bad Houston team.
Yep.
And he was putting up sometimes really good numbers, if not MVP caliber numbers, without a lot of help around him. So I mean, somebody's, I don't know. I wonder if somebody's gonna be like, I can fix him.
Well, let's go back in time. Pre-massage issues with Deshaun Watson. So post ACL injury, I think, with Houston, he's thinking about getting back into the game. You talked about the numbers he put up in Houston on a really bad team. As a Steeler fan, when the Browns made the trade, I'm thinking, oh crap, like, I don't want to see this guy twice a season, because he could be a viable, legitimate player in the league. We've seen it. And then I saw the contract and I said, holy hell, like, this is going to change everything. There's certain contracts that just change the landscape. And so, like you said, I thought they gave up way too much in terms of draft capital to the Houston Texans, and the contract, I think, that was like twisting the knife. So if trading all those first round picks wasn't enough, now you're giving him all this guaranteed money. It's like, okay, now we're just twisting the knife. The Browns fans, people would talk about, yeah, we got our quarterback, but deep down in the recesses of their brain, they knew this was really, really bad.
And we didn't say the extra number. So the Browns traded 3 first-round picks, a third-round pick, and 2 fours, and then immediately signed him to a 5-year, $230 million contract with all $230 million guaranteed.
Yep.
So
fully guaranteed contract.
Yeah.
Is this the gold standard for an NFL swing and miss?
I mean, I think that So I don't think it's the worst trade of all time, and it's debatable on if it's the worst it's probably the worst contract of all time if he doesn't ever throw a pass for him again. But I don't know if it's the worst trade of all time. Together, it's the biggest swing and miss. There's a couple of contracts, I think really probably 2 contracts that you can say had the impact and were as bad. And then there's a few trades where if we just put up the trade, I don't think it's the worst trade of all time. I think there's some other ones, but together it's pretty awful.
The swing and miss. This would be the gold standard. You could say that the swing might be the
Yeah.
trade, and
Yeah, and
hey,
the
you're a baseball guy. I know your kids play softball, but listen, what's worse than a swing and miss is a going down looking. A backwards
Right.
K in the book is so freaking embarrassing. This is the epitome of a backwards K. This is awful. So let's start with trade. You want to start with trades or contracts? You have like your list of what you think the worst are in NFL history in both categories. Which way do you want to go first?
I mean, I think let's start with the contracts just because the contract is probably far and away. There's a couple that I think
sure
you can say kind of rival it.
All right, go for it.
I mean, so what's funny is you talk about these contracts and none of them sound that bad anymore with the crazy amounts of money that people are making, but you've got to like put yourself into the mindset of what was being done. So in 2009, the Washington Redskins signed Albert Hainsworth to a 7-year, $100 million deal.
Great
41 million guaranteed. Now, you'll sit there and think for somebody that was hoped to be a pass rusher, 7 years and $100 million doesn't sound like a lot of money, but I promise it was crazy back then. Nobody could believe it.
At the time, yeah.
He played 20 games for the team, had 6.5 sacks, and had 53 total tackles. He immediately came in out of shape. He signed the contract and before playing a game, criticized the defensive scheme before ever playing. Came in out of shape, got benched, got hurt. Just always had problems, was publicly arguing with leadership of the team. And this was a big deal Albert Hainsworth kind of washed around. I think he went to the Patriots and Buccaneers and maybe one other team later on, but he didn't even play for any of them. But a huge contract at the time. Did you remember the Hainsworth? Yeah. I couldn't believe that a defensive lineman was getting paid this money.
I was surprised by the total number. I was surprised by the guarantees because remember, back in that time, no one was getting that much guaranteed money in the NFL. No. But also, this was post like when Albert Hainsworth stepped on a dude's head.
Stomped on a guy's face.
Yes. And so he had those issues along with the other stuff. So when you're looking at the contract and all these things, like, yeah, you're like, holy hell, what is going on? I can't believe. But if there was a team at that time that was going to do that deal, it was the then Washington Redskins. Daniel Snyder was going to pay someone a crazy, ludicrous amount of money, and they weren't going to pan out because that's just not what the Redskins did. So I agree. That was a horrible contract.
So there's one other one that, again, going back to old numbers, doesn't sound bad, but it's what it led to might make it the worst contract in NFL history, and it's debatable. So in 1995, Andre Rison signed a 5-year, $17 million deal with the Cleveland Browns. $5 million signing bonus, $5 million guaranteed. This doesn't sound crazy, but at the time, it was the highest contract that a wide receiver had ever gotten. Art Modell, the owner of the Cleveland Browns, did not have $5 million to pay him as a signing bonus. He had his wife take out a loan for $5 million. He was in financial distress. He now put his wife in financial distress. And a year later, he's moving the team from Cleveland to Baltimore to get away from his financial debts. There was other things that kind of led to it. There was financial problems, but this may have been the final straw that broke the camel's back and had him where he had to leave Cleveland. Now, in addition to this, Andre Rison was terrible. The home crowd was booing him. He was screaming at the home crowd, doing interviews, talking about the home crowd sucks and all that. When they announced that they were leaving to Baltimore, he's like, bye, Cleveland, we're headed to Baltimore. He never played a snap in Baltimore because they cut him because he sucked. So it's a crazy thing that went down. But the highest contract in NFL history for a wide receiver at the time had to get paid for him by a wife taking out a loan cause financial distress across the family. The family moves the franchise from Cleveland to Baltimore. And I mean, a lot of people won't remember this, but this was a big deal at the time that actually may have been the reason that Cleveland lost their football team for a few years.
That is, I never would have guessed that. I knew the story of why they moved. I didn't know the story about the $5 million and having to have his wife go out
His
and get a
wife took
loan.
out a loan for $5 million and he gave the money to Andre Rison.
There's a theme here, folks. There's two organizations that continually make these type of F ups. It's Cleveland and Washington, just so we're clear. But more Cleveland than Washington so far. Those have been great, but still, I think the Deshaun Watson contract trumps them all. I would even think about, you talk about contracts that weren't necessarily bad, but definitely changed the game. Go back to Kirk Cousins' deal with Minnesota, and he got off. I think it was 80 million guaranteed, and everyone just freaked out.
Yep.
And they freaked out. Oh my God, you're giving him this much guaranteed money. Now you look at Deshaun Watson. It's like,
I thought
well,
it was 2 years, 90 million, wasn't it? Or was it 80?
Yeah, but not all of it was
Oh, wasn't
guaranteed.
guaranteed. Okay.
Like there wasn't a
It was
fully
still, it was
guaranteed
still
deal.
crazy. It was still crazy.
Yeah, maybe 50 million of the 90 was guaranteed, and people were having a cow. Like, oh my God, how's he giving away this? They're giving away this much money. Now you look at Deshaun Watson, 230 fully guaranteed, and you're like, yeah, that wasn't too bad. All right, what about trades? Because this is, the trade in and of itself that we already talked about with the Cleveland Browns and Houston Texans absolutely is going to be near the top of that list. But there's other trades that a lot of people know a lot about, but I'm sure you have a long list of trades that are definitely bad. Are you doing 5 to 1? Or are you doing 1 to 5? Or do you have 5?
I have 5.
Okay. How are you announcing
I'll go
these?
5 to 1.
Sounds good.
Now, all of these, we have revisionist history of knowing what the outcome was, that maybe the day it happened, it wasn't terrible, but the outcome is bad. In 1992, in 1991, the Atlanta Falcons drafted Brett Favre 33rd overall. A year later, he's in a public spat with, I think Glanville was the coach, and they didn't get along. So they traded him to the Green Bay Packers for a number 1 pick, for a first round pick. Brett Favre goes on to have a pretty great career and win a Super Bowl, and is a Hall of Famer. Trading who ends up being a Hall of Famer who barely plays for you, it ends up being a big deal there, I think. So I'll go number 5.
All right, I think that's fair, because really, when you think about Atlanta at that time, who did they have after Favre?
Jeff George.
Chandler was one, I think. This is obviously pre-Michael Vick. So, it definitely put them – they didn't do much with that first-round pick.
Well, I think that just a couple years later, Atlanta actually made another, debatable top 10 bad trades of all time when they traded for Jeff George for Indianapolis.
Yeah, okay. I remember that now.
They gave up a lot to get him and gave him a big contract, and he was never successful.
All right, what's number 4?
Well, this will be near and dear to your heart. So in 1996, the Rams got really excited about a new running back named Lawrence Phillips out of Nebraska and how he was going to take over and be a great running back. So they gave up on their third-year running back, Jerome Bettis. They traded him, Jerome Bettis, and a 3 to the Steelers for a 2nd and 4th round pick. So, I mean, it's just kind of a 3rd for a 2nd and 4th. It's kind of just that you're giving away Jerome Bettis, who is enshrined in Canton as a Hall of Fame running back now, and won a couple of Super Bowls with the Pittsburgh Steelers.
But he won one because he stepped away after the Super Bowl 40. Right. But I will say this, Jerome Bettis came out of Notre Dame as like a fullback. And so he was a fullback. They got a new coach, and the coach like, I don't have a need for you anymore. I think he was a Pro Bowler his rookie year. He had a great rookie year. And then they made the regime shift, and this guy felt that he was expendable. And Bill Cowher said, look, I want you to come here, and I want you to tote the rock for the Steelers. We're going to be a ground and pound team. And I've always said this to Steeler fans out there. If you're a younger fan and all you know of Jerome Bettis is that the waning years, do yourself a favor, go to YouTube and search up Jerome Bettis highlights back in the mid-90s. And the dude was a monster because he had the most nimble feet for a big man I've ever seen. Earl Campbell-esque, in my opinion. So, yeah, I agree. I think this trade deserves to get more attention in terms of being bad.
Yeah, I mean, it's and again, the fallout of is Lawrence Phillips he had a bad reputation coming out of Nebraska. He played one season with the Rams, and then I'm pretty sure he's in prison for murder or something. He was not a good person, and
And he went straight to homicide. Straight to homicide.
continued to make problems.
All right, what's number 3?
Number 3 is, I think people will forget the trade that was made, but it's a big trade, and then one of the worst draft picks of all time followed. In 1998, the Chargers had the 3rd overall pick. They wanted to move up one slot to number 2. To move up one slot, they traded 2 first-round picks, a second, and 2 players. Once they traded up all that, they drafted Ryan Leaf. So again, kind of looking at the back end of it, you did all that to move up one slot, but then to then draft Ryan Leaf, who's just one of the biggest swing and misses of all time. You can't excuse it, and it buried the franchise for a long time. It was a terrible.
Yeah. And like you said, revisionist history. Ryan Leaf was an accomplished college player. Did he have red flags? Yes. Were those ignored? Yes. But at the same time, man, like people that make these moves, sometimes what are you seeing that the rest of the league isn't? Look at Jerome Bettis as an example. Like Jerome Bettis had success in the league. He wasn't like he was floundering, and then they decided to ship him away. This is bad. This is a really bad one. But I think the next 2 are going to be equally as bad. Actually, more bad, worse.
they're close. So honestly, I think that number 2 is the worst trade of all time. But again, revisionist history, what ended up happening makes it number 2. So number 2, in 1999, the New Orleans Saints traded their entire draft.
Literally.
Like, so they didn't have a second, but they traded a 1st, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th, and then next year's 1st and 3rd.
Gosh.
To the Washington Redskins so that they could draft Ricky Williams. You don't trade your entire draft for one player.
And a 1st and a 3rd the next year. Like, it's not just that year's draft. You traded 2 really important picks the following year as well.
The only reason that this isn't the worst trade of all time is because 3 years later, the Saints traded him to Miami for 4 draft picks, including 2 firsts. So they at least, at some point, they did get their 2 firsts back, and they did draft Reggie Bush. And so they ended up going in the right direction eventually, but it took 3 years, and it was the end of Mike Ditka. Everybody makes still a joke about him trading an entire draft, and then Ricky Williams taking a picture with him wearing a wedding dress. Like, the whole fallout was just completely ridiculous and embarrassing for a franchise. But they traded their entire draft for 1 pick and picked Ricky Williams, a running back.
I agree with you that the Saints saved a little bit of face by flipping him.
A little bit.
Yeah, and getting some of the draft capital back. And they do eventually get Reggie Bush, who was a good player for a couple of years there. So, but number 1, everyone thinks of what is the worst trade in NFL history. They think of, I'll let you say it.
The Dallas Cowboys trading Herschel Walker to the Minnesota Vikings.
That haul was insane because of who they drafted. Sometimes people don't look at.
That's what they became, the dynasty, the team of the 90s because of this trade.
Right. And so you look at, like, what would be interesting is go back to Washington. Who did they draft after getting all those Saints picks? Most of them probably didn't pan out.
Right.
It's the same with the Steelers in 2019 when they traded a 1st-round pick to the Miami Dolphins for Minkah Fitzpatrick. You go back and look who they drafted. Some guy who's now a journeyman tackle in the league. That's it. Yep. And so, wow, Steelers got the best of that one. So
if the Cowboys take those picks and draft of the era, Ryan Leaf and Ricky Williams, we're not talking about this. But they drafted Troy Aikman and Emmitt Smith and and many other players because they traded Herschel Walker for. It was Herschel Walker, 2 3s, a 5, and a 10. Yes, because it was 10 rounds back then.
Yeah.
They traded for 4 players, 3 firsts, 3 seconds, a 3rd, and a 6th. And Jimmy Johnson went on to just crush drafting for a couple of years and build out of that one draft, the team of the 90s.
Yeah.
It's absolutely insane that, and again, it's the end. If they draft a bunch of crappy players and nobody knows, and it's like, yeah, Herschel Walker, he was on the Olympic bobsled team, and Herschel Walker goes on. I think he played 2 seasons in Minnesota, did not rush for 1,000 yards in either one of them. It didn't pan out for them like it did for the Cowboys. But
I will say now the golden goose by far, swing and miss. It's the Cleveland Browns and Deshaun Watson, because it's both. It's a horrible contract and it was a huge trade. And so even when you go back and look at what the Texans did with those picks, they did get some good players in return. Yep. So, all right, we spent a lot of time on that. We do want to talk about some news in the world of football, especially the National Football League. Before we talk about proposals that were passed, tabled, and shot down, I want to get your thoughts. I can't believe I missed this. This was on Monday afternoon, evening. The NFL is taking Christmas forever now. So it used to be an NBA thing. When it fell on Christmas a couple years ago, they had a game. Last year, they had 2 games. They called it the NFL, the holiday remix, because the 4 teams that were playing on Christmas Day, that was the Eagles, the Ravens, the Steelers, and the Chiefs. They played each other the previous Saturday. Here's what they're planning this year. This is a Thursday now, mind you. Christmas is on a Thursday in 2025. A triple header. They're giving us 3 games, game 1 and 2 on Netflix, game 3 on Amazon. Now, before we go into this, talk about this, I want to, this is from Warren Sharp. Okay. I would say he's a notable name on Twitter, at least. Listen to what these numbers were from last year's games in terms of viewership. Last year, the Steelers and Chiefs had $24.1 million, or maybe $24.1 million viewers. And I want to remind everyone, that was a 1:00 kickoff. That wasn't a 4:30 slate. So how many families were still opening presents and doing all that stuff at 1:00? Then the later game, Ravens and Texans, 24.3 million viewers. If you want to know how that ranked up against the NBA on Christmas Day, Lakers Warriors, 7.7 million, Celtics 76ers, 5.1, Knicks Spurs, 4.9, Timberwolves Mavs, 4.3, and Nuggets Suns, 3.8. So even the most watched NBA game on Christmas Day, the NFL more than tripled the viewers. And this was not on regular cable television. This was on a streaming service. So, Wesley, that's a lot of stuff thrown at you. What do you think about that?
Yeah. So you add the top 4 NBA games together, and their viewership doesn't equal either one of the NFL games.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is a huge declaration by the NFL that, I mean, and the NBA is not going to be happy about it. Because the NBA, like, Christmas Day has been like one of their flagship days. Like, it's a big deal when the schedule is released to who's going to play.
Right.
And so now we're getting the 3rd game on Amazon. I mean, it's going to affect the viewership numbers. These viewer numbers are going down on the NBA games when there's a 3rd NFL game. Now, last year, we did have a perfect mix of, we just happened to have 4 teams that were in the playoff races, and they're playing each other, with the Chiefs, Steelers, Ravens, and Texans. And then we, a week later, had a swap to where those same 4 teams are playing again. So can they repeat these numbers of over 24 million viewers? If it works out, this is late in the year. If it works out that it's teams that aren't doing so good, what if it's these same teams, but next year CJ Stroud blows out his knee in week 4, so he's not even playing in the game, and or Lamar Jackson is hurt, and so I mean, I wonder if this can be, if what we had last year was a perfect storm that led to everybody wanting to watch these two games, and can you manufacture that again and get lucky to where you're dealing with teams that are in the playoff race?
I think for me, what's interesting about this is the fact that, if first and foremost, the NFL is going to have more flexibility this year because it's on a Thursday. They're not going to have to do the Saturday to Wednesday. And by the way, thank you for clarifying. I said Eagles. It was the Texans, not Philadelphia, in the mix in those remix games. But I think they're going to be able to select teams that they think and know are going to be viable playoff contenders to keep the games attractive.
Like the Bengals were last year.
They would have been a good get at the end of the season. They were pushing to a playoff spot, like they
By
sucked
then,
early
for
on.
the network, yeah.
But and you know what? They're entertaining. So even if they suck, unless Joe
They're still
Burrow and
fun.
one of the big names gets hurt,
Right.
they're still going to be entertaining because they're going to score points. 24 million viewers. It was on Netflix, folks. This isn't like your NFL network or anything like this. Isn't CBS. This isn't a Peacock. Like, it was on Netflix. These are people. This is amazing to me, which tells me that people will just kill for NFL football. They don't care who's playing. And if it's a special event and if it's a holiday and everyone's gathering, guess what? Television's on. They're watching the game. It's a standalone game. There's 3 of them now, but they're going to be 3 standalone games. They're not going to,
Yep.
it's not going to be what they did with Monday Night Football last year, but they have 2 games going on at the same time. And you're kind of, I don't know why they would do that. That feels like you're eating your own product, but I think it's going to be fine. What are your final thoughts here before we move on?
So, one question is, I mean, is there going to be another Beyonce halftime show, or is Netflix going to do another big $10 million halftime show with somebody type thing?
Maybe.
I'll say this. So as much as I watched these games and I was excited to have games last year, I don't think the NFL should ever play on a Tuesday or Wednesday without some sort of weird weather thing. And I don't like it for the integrity of the game, health of players, all that kind of thing. It throws off the week before and the week after. It's going to either create some sort of unfairness where somebody has too much rest or not enough, or it's like a second bye week for somebody. I don't like that. This being on a Thursday, I feel a lot better about it. Like, definitely want to have the games out there, and I'm excited about it. There's going to be great numbers, and I'll be watching.
Yeah, for sure. Last year's Christmas sucked, by the way. I'm a Steeler fan. You should know then. All right, let's talk about some other rules that did get passed, some that didn't get passed. So let's start off with the ones that did get passed at the league owners' meetings. The NFL approved the expansion of replay assist. Okay, let's also go on to the fact that the NFL owners passed proposals to bring the playoff overtime to the regular season, but they didn't change the length of the period. It's still only 10 minutes. Also, they approved a modified kickoff rule change, which moves a touchback to the 35 and no longer the 30. Onside kick changes have been tabled for the meeting in May, and so has the tush push has been tabled until May. So we'll see about that. What are your thoughts here based on just those things before we take a look at anything else that happened at the meetings? What do you think about those rule changes?
Yeah, so I'm kind of confused about the kickoff. Like, I get they made it to where, as a kicking team, you don't want to kick it in the end zone because the team brings it all the way out to the 35 on a touchback. But on the same side, they could do like tell the receiving team, if you don't return it, touchbacks only get you to the 15. And then if you're trying to make people return kicks, put it on the onus of the person that's got the ball in their hand.
Yeah.
I've never understood
that's a good
that.
point. I never thought about that. That's a good
Yeah,
point. And for me, I look at it and say that everyone's touting how safer the play was. How many kickoffs did we actually have?
right.
I watched a lot of NFL football last year. I saw more touchbacks than I did returns. There were more returns than maybe in a usual year, but teams are just, hey, just give them the ball. Like, if I'm playing the Cincinnati Bengals, we talk about their high powered offense, make them start at the 30. I'm not interested in giving them now. Mike Tomlin tried this, failed, but still he tried it. I'm going to try and kick it so that they have to return it. And I want my coverage units to pin them inside the 30. Okay, then the rule's doing what it's supposed to do. But
right.
I think that this is neither. The replay assist thing, I need to read more into what that actually means. It's easy to say, yeah, we're expanding replay assist. Well, first, you got to use the damn thing. Sorry, pardon my language. But second, what does that entail? Like, what does the expansion of replay assist mean? I don't know what that is yet.
So there's a few things that they specifically have talked about. So one, there's going to be somebody in the booth at all times watching every play and can buzz down at any time to pause and say, hold on a minute, you didn't get that right. So they're looking for clear and obvious video evidence. The main things they're looking for is if there's a penalty to a defenseless player. So if there was not actually contact to the head or neck area, they will buzz down, like the Patrick Mahomes play in the playoffs. They would have buzzed down and go, no. His head or neck wasn't touched. Send them back.
Yeah.
Face mask. If there's no face mask or helmet or contact to the helmet opening, then they will. If they just grab like the side of the helmet and put some, tackle somebody. On horse collars, if the hand wasn't actually on the collar or nameplate, then they will, because they get those wrong about pretty often too. Tripping, if you even if you attempt to trip, if your foot does not actually make contact with their foot, if you didn't actually trip them, they will buzz down about that. And then roughing or running into the kicker, if the fouling player did actually tip the ball on replay when they annihilated the kicker, then they can buzz down about that. That's the main ones of what they're wanting to fix.
So correct me if I'm wrong. This change does not state that the replay assist official in the booth can tell them that they need to throw a flag. It's just helping to clarify if a flag is thrown, correct?
Right, correct.
So if Joe Burrow is looking at his ear hole, which happened twice last year, and it didn't get called for a face mask, replay assist does nothing. It's only if a flag is thrown and it comes to find out, no, they grabbed his shoulder pad, not his helmet.
Right.
We need to pick up the flag. That's why this still sucks.
Right.
That's why this still sucks, in my opinion.
And I guess we're still going with the chain gang, and we can't just actually figure out when a ball has crossed the end zone for a touchdown and when it has become a first down. We're just
Aren't
not
they
going to do
trying? Aren't they going to try that? Isn't that like are they experimenting with that this year, or did that get shot down? I didn't see that.
I didn't see, but from what I understand and what I've read is the technology has been there for years.
Yeah.
It's not anything to try. The ball is exactly the same weight, the same spin rate, all that kind of stuff. You can't tell any difference in the way you throw it and the way it goes. The technology is there and exists.
All right, so let's look at some other ones here before we call it a show. Detroit's proposal to eliminate an automatic first down as a penalty, that was shot down. So defensive holding and illegal contact, we predicted that. We didn't think that was going to get passed either way. Let's see here. I talked about the tush push being tabled. Detroit's bylaw proposed related to playoff seating has been tabled as well. The Pittsburgh Steelers proposal to allow for Zoom calls during the legal tampering period with the players was passed. So this is allowing them to speak one-on-one with the players and not just through their representation, their agents. Some people call that change significant. And to explain on that a little bit more, expand on that, clubs now have a one-on-one video or phone call with no more than 5 prospective unrestricted free agents and to book travel upon agreeing to terms. So agents probably hate this because it feels like they're being cut out of the equation, but at the same time, I'm sure they'd be on those calls. So any thoughts on those?
I think that just that's been being done. It's just now it's legal. I don't think that's ever not been done. But now with technology, they know that it can be tracked, so they're just going to agree to it.
Yeah, that's true.
Did you think that it's significant about the overtime rule? Both teams getting the ball. Do you think that's significant, or
I don't know if it's significant?
And it was. I do like that it's 10 minutes, not 15.
Yeah, I just hope it doesn't lead to a lot of ties. That's my only thing.
Agreed.
Because I'd like to have a winner.
Yep.
Have a winner and a loser. Whenever you have a game, and this didn't happen last year, but it's happened in years prior, where you see a tie, it changes everything. It changes when you're talking playoff seedings. It's you see that stupid third number on everyone's standings now, which I hate seeing. Like, it's just idiotic. But we'll see how that goes. So, all right, good stuff, Wesley. I'm sure we'll have some more to dissect next week. But why don't you tell everyone where they can find you on social media?
You can find me on X at @WhoDatWesley13. Talk to you about any of your sports. Is Tiger Woods coming back? Is he going to win the Masters this year, Jeff?
That's a horrible April Fool's joke, by the way. Like, horrible.
It was really bad.
Tiger Woods, stay off social media.
Where can we find you, Jeff?
Well, by the way, if you find WhoDatWesley13, he's using sarcasm in the land of Twitter, which people don't pick up on and think that he's being serious.
I know somebody sent me one the other day, is seriously answering why Aaron Rodgers hasn't signed with the Steelers. I'm like,
because he doesn't want to back up Mason Rudolph. I'm like, guys, he's joking around. Seriously. You can find me at jhartman, HARTMAN_PIT. You can check out all my work with the Steelers at steelcurtainnetwork.com and wherever you get your podcast at Steel Curtain Network. But Wesley, man, thanks for your time. We'll talk next week. Take it easy.
Thanks, man.